So we're going to talk about remedies to market failure. If an externality is not internalized, that means that there's market failure, right? So there are ways, these are the ways that an externality can be internalized in order to move the allocation of resources closer to the optimal level. Types of private solutions to externalities. 1, moral codes and social sanctions. Take, for example, people don't litter. Littering, that's a moral code. Littering is looked down upon, right? So, like fast food is a product, right? They put it in bags. A lot of people eat it in their car. They throw the fast food bags out the window. You may have seen that somewhere in this neighborhood or on the street. But in general, that is looked down upon. Most people would not do that. And in some places, so it's a moral code not to litter your fast food bags. Okay, a negative externality of fast food would be pollution. Charities is a second type of private solution. Take, for example, on the environment, the Sierra Club, right? The Sierra Club, to promote a positive externality of having a clean environment, the Sierra Club supports that. You can pay dues and be active in that club, and it promotes good environmental practices. Self-interest of relevant parties is a third way to internalize an externality. How that would work is like a beekeeper and an apple grower. They work together, right? The beekeeper needs an apple grower needs bees to pollinize its apple trees, and likewise, the beekeeper needs a place where its bees can harvest a lot of nectar, right? So it would be in the best interest of both for the apple grower to allow the beekeeper to keep its hives on an apple orchard, and they do that. So that way, the apple grower's trees get pollinated, and the bees get nectar to make their nests or honeycombs or whatever they make, and survive and grow. So that's how self-interest of both, if they work together, they can promote a positive externality in that way. Contracts. Okay, if these apple grower and a beekeeper did have this arrangement, they would probably have an agreement as to the number of trees the apple grower would have and the number of bees the beekeeper would keep on the orchard. So contracts are a part of that. Everybody have that? Everybody's got it? Okay. All right. Coase theorem. The Coase theorem says the proposition that if private parties can bargain without the cost of reallocation of resources, they can solve the problem externalities on their own. Everyone's better off. So if these, if these arrangements, like between the apple grower and the beekeeper, can be made, it helps the economy. It helps the society. It helps society. Everybody's better off if these type of relationships are formed. But note that it says without cost over the allocation of resources. If they make a contract, they're probably going to have to hire a lawyer. There's going to be some cost to coming to this kind of agreement. So the Coase theorem is really not realistic because of the bargaining part of it, the transaction cost to it. So an example of the Coase theorem would be, say, the neighbor pays the dog owner so much to get rid of a barking dog. Okay, most people are probably not going to get rid of their dog, but in this example, the then there's a negative externality from the barking dog. So a neighbor may pay their neighbor $500 and that they give their dog away to someone else, get rid of the dog. That would be a solution with the coast theorem, and where everybody's better off. The dog owner has $500 more. The neighbor has peace and quiet. Now, and like I said, why does the coast theorem fail? Because of the transaction costs incurred in bargaining. There are expenses involved with coming to this kind of an agreement. Do I have this? Everybody's got it? Okay. All right. So, public policies towards externalities. There are two types. Command and control policies, like regulation, is command and control. What organization in the government does a lot of regulation? EPA, right, Environmental Protection Agency. Although the current administration, that's not very strong, but anyways, it stops companies from polluting into water and the air that's going to affect the health of citizens. Right, so they regulate that with laws and rules and fines. Regulation makes certain behaviors required or forbidden. It should say or. It says of. It should say or forbidden. An example, it's a crime to drop poisonous chemicals into the water supply. The EPA would regulate that. All right, any questions on that? Everybody's got it. Okay. So usually they set an amount like 300 tons of glop in a river by a paper company. That's the byproduct or the pollution from a paper company. When they make paper, there's glop. And they dump, if they're going to dump that into the river, then they have to limit that to 300 tons a year. Okay, a second-based kind of policy is a market-based policy. These are incentives. Market-based policies are incentives for a company to, say, pollute less. And so an example would be Pagovian taxes. Pagovian taxes are enacted to correct the effects of negative externalities. So if you do not exceed certain pollution levels, you don't have to pay a Pagovian tax, right? If you do, you have to pay the tax. Okay, so there's an incentive, monetary incentive, not to pollute a certain amount or whatever negative externality, not to create the amount of negative, as much of a negative externality by Pagovian taxes. Is an example of an incentive that they can use. Economists prefer taxes to regulation because companies will reduce pollution more than the regular amount with Pagovian taxes. So companies they'll get a greater reduction in the negative externality if there's a Pigovian tax incentive than if there's a regulation. Everybody have that? Okay. Subsidies. Another type of incentive. Subsidy. Government pays for a positive externality or less of a negative externality. We see that like we talked about with education. The government, the state of Indiana, subsidizes state colleges with the hope of producing graduates that will contribute to the economy of the state. So that's why the government is willing to pay colleges for in-state tuition, help pay for that. Let's put them on my desk. I need to sign your pass? No. All right, everybody have all that? Okay. A blank slide there. Okay, so then we have tradable pollution permits as a another. This is referred to as cap and trade. They cap an amount, but they allow people to trade the permits. This is actually the best way to internalize a negative externality. So if you had to rank them, make note of this. If you had to rank them, the best way would be to internalize a negative externality is tradable pollution permits. Then comes Pigovian taxes. Then comes regulation. Okay, so make sure you understand that pecking order. All right, and I'll do an example of these tradable pollution permits. How that works. So with tradable pollution permits, so we would have a couple companies. So there's two companies on the river, and the EPA limits the two factories to 300 tons of guap each. All right, and how it does this is by selling them pollution permits. They'd have pollution permits of 100 tons times 3. They'd have 3 of them. So that makes there's a total of 6 permits. Right? Well, these permits are tradable. So let's say one factory determines, it wants to increase it. Factory A wants to increase its production or wants to increase pollution by 100 tons of guap. In fact, at the same time, Factory B determines they only need 2 permits, really. They only need to pollute 200 tons. So what they can do with these tradable pollution permits is Factory B could sell one of their permits for, say, $5 million. So Factory B sells one permit. That's 100 tons of pollution. To Factory A for $5 million. Okay? And so they both benefit. Total emissions still equals 600 tons. Right? This is the best method. Cap and trade. Everybody get it? Get the idea? All right. Okay, any questions on, is on your pass? No. No? Any questions on the notes? Okay.